Synthetic division. This is a shortcut for division that you can only use if the divisor is of the form x minus a or x plus a. So for example, if you have x plus 2, you can use synthetic. If you have x minus 2, you can use synthetic. But if you had 2x plus 1, you'd have to do long. If you had x squared minus 3, you'd have to do long. So synthetic can only be used if I have x minus a or x plus a, which for our purposes is going to be true because we're going to be using zeros, and the zeros we're going to get mostly from the calculator, so we're going to be able to know that we can use synthetic division. So the first thing you do is you set your divisor equal to 0. So on this problem, I'm going to set x plus 4 equal to 0, so x equals negative 4. So for the first step of synthetic division, you're going to put a little box like this, and you put the 0. So in this case, I'm going to put negative 4. Now you'll see on the next example, we're going to put a number in the box from our calculator, which is the 0. So we don't have to do that step of setting it equal. But when we want to write the factor, we're going to have to remember to go back and put it in a parenthesis, and it's going to be the opposite of what we got when we solved. So you put the 0 in the box. The next step is you list the coefficients. And make sure that you put any missing terms with the 0. So if I was missing x squared, I would put 0x squared. If I was missing, so I'm going to take the coefficient of x cubed, which is 1, and then the coefficient of x squared, which is 10, the coefficient of x, which is 32, and then the last number, which is 32. So you list the coefficients and you put that right beside the box. The next step is you're going to draw a line, leaving enough room to put a row of numbers. So I've left room here for a row of numbers. And so you're going to put the first coefficient, you're going to move it down and write it here. And then you're going to multiply by the 0. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Then you add the column and you get 6. Then do it again. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. And I get 8. And then negative 4 times 8. And I get negative 32. And notice that my remainder here is 0. Now if you know this is a 0, that means it has to divide in evenly. If it has to divide in evenly, then we know that it has to have a remainder of 0 because it is a factor. So what do these numbers mean? Well, these numbers right here are the coefficients of the quotient. So when we think about our quotient, we want to think about the fact that I was dividing x cubed divided by x. So what's my answer going to be? It's going to start with x squared. So you're always going to take whatever your highest degree was, and it's going to go down 1. So when it goes down 1, I'm going to start, this is the coefficient of x squared. So it's going to be x squared plus 6x plus 8. And then I'm going to multiply that times the second factor, which I get from the 0 here, and it's the opposite of what it looks like. So it's going to end up being x plus 4. Because remember, we had to set this equal to 0 to get to this number. Now I'm going to ask for you to give it to me in the completely factored form. So we're not done yet because we can still factor this. And we're going to get x here and x here. And it'll end up being x plus 4 and x plus 2. And then we still have the x plus 4 here. So now this is my completely factored form. So when I'm asking for completely factored, this would be the answer. And I like to make sure that we know this is an equation, so I like to see either a y equals or an f of x right there. Then if I want to find the zeros, I'm just going to set each of these things equal to 0. So I'm going to get x equals -4, -4, and -2. And that's going to be helpful to us because now we could actually make a sketch of this graph. So if I make a sketch here, and -4 is 1 0, and -2 is another 0, and then since what I started with was an x cubed, because x squared times x, so my leading coefficient would be a 1 times x cubed, it's going to go up on the right, just like we already learned, and down on the left. Then since this one is repeated twice, it's going to turn around at the -4 and go through. Any other questions you're going to answer using your calculator, but you need to be able to get these zeros, have them without a calculator, and show me the work. Let's look at another example. Now, a lot of the questions are going to be written this way. It'll say find the roots of the following polynomial and write it in factored form. So the first thing you're going to do is go and put this into your y equals, and then go to the table, press second graph, and go see what you find to be your 0. And when you do this one, you actually come up with 2 possible answers that you could use. I'm going to choose to use the 3. Now I'm going to list my coefficients. So I'm going to put 2, 5, -21, and -36. Make sure that you keep the minus as a negative with the number. Now I'm going to draw my line. And just like I did before, I'm going to bring down that first coefficient. So I'm going to bring down the 2. And then I'm going to multiply. 3 times 2 is 6. And then 5 plus 6 is 11. And then 3 times 11 is 33. And then 33 plus -21 is 12. And then 3 times 12 is 36. And so my answer comes out to be 0. Now realize that if you're choosing something that is a factor, then you expect that this is going to come out to be 0. So my first factor comes from the 3. So I'm going to put x minus 3. Remember, it's the opposite. And then since this was cubed, I'm going to go down 1. So this is going to be the coefficient of x squared. So it'll be 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. Now, is this completely factored? Well, I could multiply 2x squared times 12, and I would get 24x squared. And then I want factors of that to make an 11. That would be 8x plus 3x. Turn it into the 4 terms, so 2x squared plus that, and then plus 12 on the end. So what's in common in the first 2 is 2x, and I'm left with x plus 4. And then what's in common in these 2 is a 3, so it's 3 times x plus 4. So my factors, I'm going to leave the x minus 3 in front, and then I'm going to put x plus 4 because that's the common factor. And then what's left with it, which is 2x plus 3. And I'm going to put a y equals in front of that. So this would be my completely factored form, would be right here. So now if I wanted to write the zeros, I would get x equals 3, x equals -4, and then x equals -3 halves. So we're really going to use, and you can use synthetic division anytime you're plugging it in the calculator and finding a 0. Now someone else might have chosen to put the -4 here as the 0, and they would have still worked it out and ended up with the factors x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. So in the end they should be matching, but that's what we're going to use this synthetic division for. Now be careful, if you end up without coming up with a 0 right here, most of the time it's because the student had something missing and they forgot to put that 0 for that missing term. So that's what you need to check.